Hello and good morning everyone, and thank you for joining our NetApp and Microsoft Azure webinar today. So we're joined here by Simon Brown, Microsoft Alliance Manager from NetApp, and also Kirk Ryan, Technical Solutions Architect from NetApp. They will be both going through the webinar with you today. So we also have Stuart Curry here from Bytes, and he'll be briefly talking about the relationship between NetApp and Bytes with you.
So yeah, thank you, Amy, for that. Just thought I'd set the scene quickly just about who Bytes are. I appreciate most of you have or are in awareness of Bytes as a business in the UK, located across 3 offices in the north and the south, predominantly known for our capabilities around software licensing and software asset management. But what probably didn't realise as a business is that Bytes is much larger than that across EMEA, where in effect we are now part of the Altran Group and have presence in and across Africa. Over in Africa we are a large systems integrator. As such, we provide a lot of technical capability from sort of on-prem through to managed services to our customers based predominantly around sort of NetApp and flexible technology. And that's really the crutch of where Bytes is now heading. We're diversifying as a business from not just being a software-only organisation, but now providing infrastructure. Amy, do you want to just pass that over to the next slide? So really, as before, we were just seen as the 2 columns on the left-hand side, software asset management and software licensing. We've diversified into 2 other business areas to provide data center infrastructure to support our proposition, which is predominantly around Microsoft, and also we now offer cloud services. And obviously the crutch of this call is to cover both the capabilities of cloud, what does that mean, but also NetApp and Microsoft too. So really, our proposition is quite a simple proposition for our customers. It's all about flexibility and offering some agility to our customers, be it for an on-prem private cloud platform or the ability to move data and applications into the cloud. It's really about choice for our customers, and that's really our proposition going forward. So without further ado, what I'll do is pass over to Simon Brown, who's the Microsoft Alliance Manager at NetApp, to further the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. Morning, everybody. My name's Simon Brown. I've been at NetApp now for nearly 9 years, and for the last 2 or 3 years I've had responsibility in the UK for our alliance relationship with Microsoft, but also with 1 or 2 of the other hyperscale cloud providers. I'll introduce in a couple of minutes, once I've finished kind of the basic scene setting of the rest of the conversation this morning. I'll introduce you all to Kirk Ryan, my colleague who's the consulting SE for NetApp in the UK, specialising on Microsoft workloads and also our hyperscale cloud offering. So one of the things that we have traditionally been known as, obviously, is very, very efficient, highly scalable, high-performant, on-premise data storage solutions. So I will assume a certain level of understanding for everybody on the call today, because what we're not going to spend an awful lot of time talking about is kind of on-premise. We'll be talking a little bit about how on-premise solutions are integrated into both hybrid and complete hyperscale cloud environments. So we'll talk about the journey and how we help people get there. But as I say, this is a session that's predominantly based around how we start to ease the journey from on-premise into the cloud, and more importantly, when you're out in the cloud, what do you do when you're there, whether that be from a virtualized environment or actually taking on some of the characteristics, if you're already a NetApp customer, of what you experience on-premise and how that then becomes available for you up in the Microsoft Azure cloud. So for anybody that is unfamiliar with us, we are, as soon as the Dell and EMC merger goes through, we're now the only independent enterprise storage vendor left. Over $6 billion of revenue every year, founded just over 25 years ago, and have consistently grown and innovated, whether that be through application-based capability, whether that be SharePoint or Exchange or SAP or Oracle, right the way through the virtualization era with huge growth alongside VMware and Hyper-V environments, and latterly in and around private cloud in particular, and more importantly over the last 18 months into the kind of hybrid cloud environments. If you can move the next slide on, please, Kirk. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is our our Great Place to Work surveys, and the reason why I bring that up and mention it during this call is that there is a collective will from an engineering perspective, for instance, to collaborate and generate new ideas that add significant value to our customers. One of the things that drives most of our product innovation, for instance, is feedback from our customers. So if you're familiar with the Snap Manager tool suite of products at all, the majority of those for individual applications were developed as a direct result of conversations with significant enterprise customers. So that collaborative nature and that ability for the business to support people who want to innovate has been very, very strong, and that obviously reflects in the awards that we see from the GPTW surveys. Being specific now in terms of technologies within that, so ONTAP, which is our major operating system that sits across all of our on-premise platforms, for our FAS devices at least, is the #1 operating system in the storage industry. There's more of it out there than anywhere else. One of the reasons for that is that for an awfully long time, our single platform strategy, which was essentially to enable capability for people just with software licenses as opposed to deploying several different devices that need multiple different ways of managing them, means that obviously we have customers that have started with us with very, very small devices and have scaled significantly up into high-end enterprise class storage area networks, for instance, with multi-petabytes of capacity within there. We are, in terms of public cloud infrastructure, with great heritage over in the US for Department of Defense and into central government in the US, but over in the UK as well, really good experience into universities and healthcare. And our market share statistics are kind of reflected within that. And from an integrated perspective, in terms of capacity shipped, we're there or thereabouts, year in, year out, as far as the Gartner and IDC reports are concerned. More specifically, when we start talking about Microsoft environments, what does this mean? The reality is that it wouldn't mean an awful lot if we weren't as heavily invested into integration with Microsoft as we are. So I mentioned a couple of minutes ago about how we grew through kind of the application era. So optimizing applications for Microsoft workloads like Exchange 10 years or so ago, when we put the capability of restoring a single mailbox to a moment only 2 or 3 minutes ago in a user's hand as opposed to an admin's hand, was pretty significant. We've continued to build on that kind of technology integration heritage over the last 10 or 15 years. Right the way through the virtualization era to the last 2 or 3 years, when Microsoft now consistently awards medals, awards to NetApp and recognize us as, well, this year, Private Cloud Platform Partner of the Year, Public Cloud Partner of the Year. We've been Server Platform Partner of the Year for Microsoft within the last 2 or 3 years, which are interesting awards to win when you think that actually we're a storage company. We care about how you manage, protect, and share your data. So to win awards based on server infrastructure partner, for instance, have been pretty interesting. The reasons why we pick up those bits of recognition from Microsoft are because we integrate so tightly. If we think about private cloud infrastructure for Microsoft for a second, and the platform that they use to manage private clouds, which is obviously System Center, we're the only storage vendor on the planet that's API complete with System Center, which means that any task that you would like to automate and orchestrate using PowerShell absolutely can be run via System Center on a NetApp filer. It doesn't matter how simple or how complicated that command is. We are completely integrated with System Center, so building out the capability to make that a more efficient platform to be managed based on tools that you're already using for your network and your compute environment seems to make an awful lot of sense. It makes even more sense then when we start to talk about how that integrates and steps up into Microsoft's Azure cloud. So over the next probably 6 or 7 slides, where we talk about Cloud ONTAP, which is the virtual version of our operating system that sits up in the hyperscale clouds, we'll spend, and you'll see reference to Amazon Web Services as opposed to Microsoft Azure. And there's a very, very simple reason for it. Cloud ONTAP for Azure is not publicly available yet. It isn't publicly available until late spring, so May, June time, which means that unless we turn around and provide specific NDAs for each and every one of you, we can't talk about that. But what we can talk about, which is publicly available and has been for 18 months or so, is Cloud ONTAP in AWS. So you are very, very safe in assuming that the capabilities, both in terms of technical capabilities, but also bring your own license and pay-as-you-go type characteristics of the virtual platform in AWS will be consistent right the way across to the Azure platform when that's released. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Kirk Ryan now to talk through Cloud ONTAP, how it works, use cases, and some of the benefits that that can hopefully bring to you as individuals. Thanks.
Thanks, Simon. So we're going to talk about Cloud ONTAP. Cloud ONTAP, as you should know by now, is now a fully virtualized version of the ONTAP storage system that we can now extend into hyperscalers. And as Simon mentioned, we've already got it in AWS with additional providers on the way. What it actually looks like is, well, it gives you two major benefits really. If you're an existing NetApp customer, then it's a very easy way of extending your storage strategy into the hyperscaler. But it also got significant value if you're not currently a NetApp customer as well, because of the things that the ONTAP operating system itself are capable of, and a lot of people would take these for granted if you've been with ONTAP for a long period of time. I've used ONTAP for well over 9 years now, but being able to take those fundamental efficiencies over to cloud storage is actually quite a significant benefit. So if we did put when we put Cloud ONTAP into a hyperscaler, everything that our customers are used to on-premise is now available in the cloud. So that means that we can present any IP-based protocol in the cloud, whether that be NFS, iSCSI, or CIFS, so your file services. We can do them all simultaneously. We bring one of our key fundamental strengths, which is snapshotting. Very rapid backup with no performance overhead on native storage in the cloud. That's got huge benefit. As many of you will know, if you have been exploring cloud services and the storage offerings within, the native storage offerings do not have any form of backup as a main strategy. Many of the players there, Amazon and Microsoft, will focus on high availability only, which is how many copies of your data would you like, and would you like them geo-dispersed, rather than one of point-in-time recovery. That is something that's missing. So very quickly with Cloud ONTAP, we can provide that. We can provide that to a very granular level because, as Simon mentioned there, with our Snap Managers, one of the key fundamental things here is that all of our Snap Managers, whether it be Snap Manager for SQL, Snap Manager for Oracle, Snap Manager for SharePoint, Exchange, all of them work in our Cloud ONTAP instance, which means that if you're used to providing 1 hour backup, hourly backups on your data center, your main data center estate, then you can use that same schedule using cloud storage. And not have to lose any of your storage strategy or protection strategy when consuming from hyperscalers. It also means that we can get really smart because we've got replication between ONTAP instances. ONTAP, as you know, can run on our physical hardware. It can run virtualized in the hyperscalers, but it can also run virtualized in front of other people's hardware as well, whether that be a standard server, what we call ONTAP Edge, or whether it be a NetApp in front of a competitor's array, and we can present that out as ONTAP as well. So the strategy here is ONTAP everywhere to enable replication between all of them. And replication, it has tremendous value there because one of the key problems a lot of our customers experience is a challenge around moving data between private and public clouds. and also data governance and security as well. So having that all being able to be audited and monitored from within an ONTAP manageability suite has tremendous value. There are some other things on the bullet points there that you'll see. So flex cloning is absolutely fundamentally a huge productivity enhancer when it comes to cloud services. Many people are moving to cloud services for DevOps or test use cases. The fact that we can now say, okay, you've moved your database to the cloud, and now we can instantly clone up to 254 copies of it and not consume an additional block of space. That means that compared to without this offering, if you were to do the same, you would have to pay for 254 times what that original database would be without this offering. That's a huge thing. Oh, and by the way, we do it instantly. So if you imagine that your teams are now using AWS, they're using Azure, and the fundamental shift there was the fact that they can scale up and scale down and make the cost savings in between. But when you do your business case studies and have a look at it, there's not many savings to be done on the storage versus your private storage that you have already. And there's one key fundamental difference there, is that you can't scale your storage. If you move a terabyte to the cloud, you pay for it until you shift it all back or delete it. You can't just switch it off because everything else breaks underneath. So with this, what we're able to do is actually store it a lot more efficiently. We put thin provisioning in place, so your systems think you've got 2 terabytes, but you're only paying for 1. We put the deduplication in and compression, and we're also able to very quickly replicate to and from the cloud, which makes this altogether, a very attractive proposition for being able to consume cloud services in an enterprise fashion. On top of all of that, we've gone and actually created a dedicated web-based interface called Cloud Manager. And Cloud Manager actually simplifies the management of Cloud ONTAP instances. If quite simply, your storage admin would log into Cloud Manager and say, I would like a virtual ONTAP system, I want it to have this much capacity, and I want it to be this performant, and they can pick the performance of it. It then at the back end will automatically go and provision the right EBS block storage, or on Azure it would do the correct storage tiering that it needs on there, and present to you all the metrics as to what the performance of that system is, what's replicated to and from it, what data is actually stored on that system, but also to monitor your cost savings, it's tied into the charging API from these providers, and will show you the cost per hour and how much you've used for that day on those actual instances as well. So very powerful. So the benefits of Cloud ONTAP. Obviously you're going to pay for what you use by the hour, which is great for development and tests, DR, or even workload management. Great for if your projects have certain budgets allocated to them, and you can allocate based on that rather than borrowing from one project to try and subsidize another project elsewhere down the line. It makes it very easy to know that the storage element of it is very easy to plan for. It's deployed very quickly. It's all within that workflow manager of Cloud Manager. You click deploy and it will handle doing the storage, the networking, any VPCs or VNets that you need to be provisioned will be provisioned, and it will also handle the relationship back to your private cloud. And right now, obviously today, you can buy it directly off the AWS Marketplace, but in future it will also be listed on the Azure Marketplace as well. So when we look at all the efficiencies that we've got, the fact that we can now provision network services in the cloud, but also there's one other thing here, is that the software support that comes with every instance. Software support when it comes to cloud is very important as you move more and more critical workloads across there, and having a system that enables you to do that in the first place, such as Cloud ONTAP, then you'd like to know that you get the same level of support that you would have as if it was physical hardware in your data center that you already have today. And that's true in this case. And those support prices are included in their licenses. It also gives you access to our support site for documentation, knowledge bases, and further upgrades as well. So as we upgrade the ONTAP operating system, then you can actually upgrade those instances themselves, and that's built into Cloud Manager to have that ability to do a rolling upgrade. So hopefully at this point we can see what the benefits of this system are. I'm just going to take you through what Cloud Manager does itself, the way of actually looking after and from a day-to-day organizational point of view of how I run this operationally. It's very easy. It provides a very easy interface for deploying and configuring Cloud ONTAP. It also manages, and it's not on this slide, but it also, at the bottom there, it does also manage physical NetApp equipment that's connected to the cloud as well. So for those of you that are not aware, Cloud ONTAP, you don't need any NetApp hardware for whatsoever. But we also have an ONTAP offering called NetApp Private Storage, which is where you would take physical NetApp hardware and connect it to the edge of the cloud. And Cloud Manager is able to actually manage that for you as well, including the provisioning of that storage direct into the cloud. And there are benefits to that I'll go over later on in this presentation. This will manage your data replication, which is great because that's the biggest problem that the admins have are data governance. What data is being replicated to the cloud? How often was it successful? How can I automate that? What's the effect of that on my link to the cloud? How much of my WAN am I consuming? All very fundamental, simple questions which you've already solved when you've gone for the traditional primary, secondary data center, but which are very easily overlooked when you start looking at cloud until you start consuming it again. And these are just fundamental use cases and challenges that will need solving again, which we've already solved. So just by simply moving ONTAP into the cloud natively, then we know that we can do snap mirror replication, which is replication at scale, very granular, 4K block size, change only. So a very easy way for us a very efficient way to replicate data around instances. And that's also not to forget that Cloud ONTAP instances can also replicate to one another as well. So you can have multiple Cloud ONTAP instances in several cloud providers, all managed by one interface, the Cloud Manager. And this will be telling you all of your license entitlements and also of each Cloud ONTAP instance, the cost of how much that has cost you to run that day. There are a variety of licensing choices. The two pay-as-you-go ones are listed on the left and middle. And on the right you have a bring your own license, which is you can purchase the license much as you do today directly from our partners. And the advantage of that is that when you go to a bring your own license one, you get a much higher capacity limit. It's 50 terabytes right now, but you'll expect to see that to change when we release the next version of ONTAP for both AWS and Azure as well. You do get to choose what EC2 instances you would like to put that on. The next release as well also includes a sizing tool to help you make that choice, so that you're not there with idle compute for an instance that may not necessarily require it, but also you're not also undersizing from the get-go and then experiencing perhaps some issues because you've got compute constraints. So that's very smart as well. And as you can see, as it's a storage offering, it will sit on the SSD tiers of both EBS and Azure as well, because we want very low latent, high performance storage behind this. And the workloads that benefit most from Cloud ONTAP certainly fall into that category. So if we have a look at some example use cases, this all sounds great, but really how can I use it in my business? Where is it going to have the most impact? And the first one that I'd call out straight away is going to be dev and test. Building the environment in the cloud, dev and test usually, and in many cases, the dev environments of existing states can consume double, triple, much more than than your actual production environments because of what the developers will run on those estates, whether it be stress testing, performance testing, or simply a query that maybe perhaps shouldn't have been run because it wasn't optimized for your system, and the impact is that it generated a higher workload than your normal daily workload that's on the estate. And I've seen that happen firsthand. So with this, you're able to say, okay, well, what we can do is we can use the on-demand compute. We know we can make space savings because we don't have to, for example, have 20 dev servers, but the majority of the time we're only ever using 10 unless we're running a peak workload. So with this, we can say, well, we'll size our data center for our production workloads. Dev and UAT can go out to the cloud. We can make our production workload sets replicate out to Cloud ONTAP instances, and then we can make multiple copies of that data available to all of the instances that would reside in AWS and Azure. Now that has a tremendous benefit because if now I'm given the capability to my developers to actually have their own database to work on in the cloud, then they're actually insulated from the other developers and get a lot more creative. We saw the impact of giving each developer their own environment to work on, or each team their own environment. Basically, before I worked at NetApp, I worked at a bank, and we got our iOS mobile app out 6 months quicker than we thought we would, due to this technology, because we were able to accelerate our test and dev cycles. So not only is this going to save you on storage cost, because I'm now not paying for any of those clones. When I create them, the only overhead of maintaining those clones is whatever percentage of that clone changes from its parent. So typical dev cycles are very low, single digits. Compare that to, for example, the traditional way of doing this, where straight away from day one I will have another 100% data commitment, and then the next one another 100%. You can see how this adds up. Plus the fact that when you look past the reality of it, when you're just creating copies of your data without this technology, it's very slow and time consuming, and also becomes a major part of your workload on the estate. Moving data isn't cheap. It costs in terms of network, it costs in terms of storage I/O, and it costs in terms of, and one that's very hard to quantify, is how long is your dev sat there not doing anything because they're waiting for environments to provision. This was a fundamental challenge that I had with my teams, where if an environment went down on a Wednesday because we'd done something a little bit crazy, we were testing the boundaries of what we could do, then we'd have to wait 24 hours to provision it on the traditional methods. With this, each developer could do it on demand and say, oh, that database is no longer available, so I'm going to just on demand create a clone, and all of that is available now in the cloud. And of course, we do all of this right now on-premise. Another one to look at here is actually, and we have several use cases of this. One large recruitment firm in the UK who are using this very successfully for DR. They replicate directly to Cloud ONTAP for certain instances, and they use that in the event of the plan is to use that in the event of any DR. So when they put that in almost 13 months ago now. So it's been very interesting to see that working for them as a UK case study, and it's worked very well. It's worked very well. Here, what we're able to do is actually build the DR out either at application level, so things like SQL have fantastic high availability built into the product suite. So we can take advantage of that and have failover of SQL or even Oracle nodes between cloud and private cloud. So public cloud, private cloud, and the application will handle it. So my DBA can then be responsible for making sure the app fails over without having a bottleneck of waiting for the storage admin. The other thing here as well is, of course, there are applications as well, and when we talk about Microsoft specifically, of course, Azure Site Recovery is a tool that we've been working with those guys to actually show that failing over from existing Hyper-V estates into to Azure using NetApp at the bottom end of it for storage works very well because we're fully integrated into that product. I mean, it's to the extent where I can actually run a Windows Server box and provision, monitor, and alert on my storage without using a single NetApp product. We're that integrated with the Microsoft stack now through our SMIS provider. And that's very fundamentally important. Slightly off track from today, but it's fundamentally important because when Windows Server 2016 releases, you need to have an SMIS provider to be able to get certified for Server 2016. So there are a few use cases of Cloud ONTAP and the flexibility, the benefits that brings. However, there is also one fundamental issue here, which is that many customers will not have their data in a compatible format. And let's visit one of those one of those common scenarios that I come across on a daily basis with all of our customers, which are if you're currently using VMware, which a lot of customers are, then the one quick realization you will have when you view a demo is that, yeah, that's great, but actually the reality is I can't pick up my VMware VM and just move it to Azure or move it to AWS. Or if I can, there are some solutions out there that may do that for me, but then they start to introduce quite a bit of a cost. So if you're an existing NetApp customer, this software, OnCommand Shift, is available for you free of charge. There is no additional license cost for this. If you're not an ONTAP customer, then even the Cloud ONTAP instances, when you fire them up, actually entitle you to OnCommand Shift. And what this does is it allows you to solve the problem of multi-hypervisor. So when we start looking at cloud, the first thing you're going to realize is VMware doesn't talk to AWS and VMware doesn't talk to Azure and Hyper-V doesn't talk to VMware. There are bridges in between of how to get there, but they're quite restrictive. And more importantly, they either introduce an additional cost or an additional time overhead to get there. There are two methods that are highly used, cold migration and hot migration. Cold migration is affordable, extremely scalable because you're not replicating blocks all the time down your network. However, there is an outage, you've got to move the data, and it's slow. Hot migration is fast, however, you've then got to install filter drivers and do software replication. You've got to physically move the data around. It's expensive and it's typically used in small batch migrations, so 50 to 250 VMs at a time. So now we understand the complexity of that. It's complex, it's costly, it's time consuming. You know, it can take even a few weeks to sit there with the network engineers and realize what IPs map to other subnets on the other side. How are we going to construct the network on the other side? It becomes quite a big project, and the dream of having cloud to just scale up and scale out on demand starts to become a bit cloudy. When we look at this, then any introduction of downtime or anything like that in production it is unacceptable. And I have been sat with customers. It's been that we've been working with them, and when we first approached the projects, they were told it would take 18 months to get them to the cloud. So NetApp actually went away, and this isn't something brand new. We've been working on this and realized this quite early on, almost 3 years ago now, with something that we called Project Shift at the time. The idea behind Shift is that if your data is already on a NetApp system, and if it's not, just move it on there, a live migration or a storage vMotion. You're not even going to take downtime to move it onto the NetApp system. It doesn't have to live there permanently. You can use the NetApp as swing kit if that's your desire. But once it's on the NetApp system, NetApp does something fundamentally different. If we've got your virtual machines already, then why would we ever create another copy of them? Because we don't need to. We don't need to store that data again multiple times and then edit that data into the right format, so that you've now got one virtual machine which could have been 1 terabyte, and then you've got an additional terabyte being taken up by this new converted VM, because that's going to take time. It's going to take disk I/O, and it's not very efficient. So what we're able to do with OnCommand Shift is actually say, well, we're smart enough to understand the fundamental differences between these virtual machines. We know what the difference is between a VMDK-based virtual machine versus a VHD-based virtual machine, VHD being the leading format for cloud providers, both AWS and Azure. So in this instance where you've got VMware, an existing VMware estate, we're actually able to say, well, if you're on the NetApp system, we can convert you in minutes directly to the correct format, and you can either do this on your private cloud before you replicate out to Cloud ONTAP, or you can do it out in Cloud ONTAP entirely, and migrate between the formats so that you can now have a proper bridge between private and public cloud, and also solve the data compatibility issue. A quick overview of that is that on the estate here on the left, we have an existing VMware estate. And the data ONTAP instance could be physical, could be virtual, could be edge, any of our ONTAP. The key takeaway here being, as long as it's on tap, it's capable of this. Well, you present an NFS data store to your VMware instance. It then presents an SMB data store to Hyper-V, but you'll also notice that the arrows go both ways. This is really interesting because up until now, migration is thought of as a one-way big bang approach. We've made the decision to go from VMware to Hyper-V or vice versa. The reality of that is actually a lot of customers today recognize the value of Hyper-V and the cost savings of Hyper-V, but they've still got many years remaining on VMware contracts, so they're not going to remove that part of the estate, and vice versa. Some people have gone to Hyper-V and said, well, actually, we want to go to VMware because it might have a feature that they need. With NetApp, the whole premise of what we're solving is making your virtual machine universal and making it very easy to maintain several agnostic estates, so that VMware might be your choice for production, but Hyper-V might become your new choice for dev, or vice versa. And the way it works is you provision a virtual machine or a physical machine which has OnCommand Shift installed. Very quickly, it will snapshot your existing virtual machine, and don't confuse a NetApp snapshot with a VMware snapshot. NetApp snapshots have no performance impact moving forward. They're done at a volume level, and they maintain all storage efficiencies when you take them. What we do is we take a consistent snapshot, which means that I now have my failback or rollback plan delivered as part of this product. We'll go another step forward and we actually remove any existing hypervisor integration, and that's really important because now I've already got an original copy of my VMware machine sat in place in the inventory, just and it will be powered down. I also, as part of the migration, are removing any incompatible drivers that won't work in the other hypervisor estate. I migrate it, which the reality is it's a flex clone. We flex clone it and we present it out the other side. We then restore the networking in place. So your virtual machine comes out with the same IP addresses, the same MAC addresses, security identifiers, everything on the other side. So that's very powerful in itself. And if you specified when you do the migration, then it will also handle any subnet mapping as well. So if you've come off subnet 21 on the left and you want it to go to subnet 23 on the right, then we can do all that mapping for you. The server's rebooted, the networking is restored, and the virtual machine is powered on in Hyper-V. Very simple, and if you're a technical person, then this is how it actually works. VMDK on the left, ONTAP providing obviously the storage. We understand the blocks, so we use all the common blocks for the VHD, and we will create any additional blocks, which are very small, typically less than a few megabytes of file difference to present out as a VHDX, which means we can do it very quickly. Hyper-V VM is able then for you to replicate out as a VHDX or a VHD. You specify at runtime what you want the end product to be, and because it's now in the correct format and you've only taken minutes to get there, you can now, with one line of PowerShell, put that straight into the AWS cloud or straight into the Azure cloud as well. You're going to quickly see that one in action. And, let's see if this plays. Okay, so how to use it? Very simple. You'll notice there was one line of code. Convert virtual machine, -name. Give it the name of your virtual machine. Next one, source. Where's it coming from? Next one, destination. Where's it going to? So in this instance, from ESX, and we want to go to Hyper-V. Hit enter, and it already knows exactly. You would have done your configuration beforehand. There's a configuration file that you map your networks onto so that it understands anything coming from this subnet is migrating to the other one. And you notice we have some rather large VMDKs there, upwards of 500, 600, and 700 gig. Now, on the left box, that is your NFS data store presented to VMware. On the right box, you actually have the SMB3 file share that's presented to Hyper-V. And what's being displayed here is the actual virtual machine itself, and we're collecting all of its settings. We store everything in XML at the back end, so you don't have to worry about provisioning a SQL server for configuration data. That's another cost and time saver for when it comes to looking at this as a migration tool. And you'll notice there's the virtual machine, it's been created, but watch how fast we can create these diffs. 52 gig, done. 520 gig, done. 630 gig, done. These are absolutely rapid using this technology. It's proven itself that Microsoft themselves have adapted this technology and built it into their key migration tool, which is called the Migration Automation Toolkit, MAT. And now that it actually exists, they've created a version of that uses our Shift engine called MAT for Shift as well. So you'll see that there that you can freely download off any Google or Bing search, and you'll see it online with plenty of videos, especially from their key migration team, a guy called Migration Mark, who's their leading migration expert. So here on the right we can see there's the virtual machine. It's been fired up in Hyper-V, it's been imported. My original VMware machine is still sat in my VMware inventory. My rollback, if I wanted to, is to just switch the Hyper-V one off and power my VMware back on. It's as simple as that. And once I'm happy that the migration has gone successfully, I can then just shut down my instance. Now these are old figures. These were done in March of last year, and I've been trying to find the latest ones. But just to give you an idea of where we were up to in March, we'd already migrated well over 1,000. I personally have migrated over 850 virtual machines across my customers today, which multiple terabytes. I worked with a university just outside of the M25 who wanted to migrate 800 virtual machines from ESX to Hyper-V, and we did the whole thing in half a day. So a big migration there for those guys. That previously they were told it would take 6 months using another technology. So we did it very quickly, and needless to say, migration was a success, and they moved straight. They have moved to Hyper-V to realize for them what was some cost savings in place. The average time of each one of those was 3 minutes to do it. We have the more corporate ones which are available online for you to see, such as Yukon Health. They made huge savings on the actual licensing themselves, and obviously your mileage with this will vary depending on how your licensing is structured. But again, just to show you that there's an inbuilt tool to NetApp systems that's available even if you don't have physical NetApp hardware. It can run on the virtual hardware as well. So just to zoom straight back out of that, as an overview, NetApp itself, we've prided ourselves on moving away from the image of we create storage hardware. You know, that was great, and that powered us all the way up until 2009, where FAS was the leading piece of hardware. We have certainly now looked at the bigger data challenge, which is making and enabling hybrid cloud and hybrid architecture. And that's something certainly where an offering such as having Cloud ONTAP, ONTAP Edge, physical ONTAP on FAS, or even the fact we can put ONTAP in front of other people's storage arrays. We've certainly gone a long way to solving that, and then putting intelligent monitoring over the top with either Cloud Manager, or if you're not purely a NetApp estate and you do have other bits and bobs all over the place, then certainly have a look at our Insight offering, which is able to monitor across entire estates your whole storage to application mapping, which is a very powerful tool, and you can get free eval of that to have a look at it. And very briefly, I did mention that Cloud ONTAP is a fully virtual offering, but you also have the option of taking a physical NetApp system and directly cabling that either through Express Route to Azure, or direct connect to AWS, and that is a private, secure line, a very low latency, very high bandwidth, directly into their cloud compute, and it means that you're not losing any data sovereignty. You retain control of your data. All of the enterprise features are there, and you can actually offer a lot more storage cheaper than you can using native storage as well. And with that is actually me. If you'd like to find out more, we've obviously got our website. I think NetApp/cloud as well has all of the cloud offerings. But thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Kirk.
Thanks, Kirk.
So, so just to kind of summarise finally before we hand over onto Amy for any questions. We spent an awful lot of time talking about our virtual capability and how we start to ease the transition both up in the cloud and also from on-premise into those hyperscale cloud providers. The interesting bit is from a use case perspective. When we started talking to customers about this a couple of years ago, we would spend a lot of time talking about sovereignty of data and availability and potentially compliance issues that people might need to adhere to. What we're finding now is customers have tried either in its entirety or piecemeal approach in terms of adopting cloud services from the hyperscalers in particular, is that we have customers coming to us talking about their concerns and issues that they need to try and fix around availability and performance and the lack of capability to build service levels with some of those hyperscale providers around core applications. And those are all things that we can obviously start to help with both virtually in terms of Cloud ONTAP, but crucially with data that sits in a location that's good for you as an individual customer, whether that be from a geographic point of view or actually in a colo that's located with high performance capabilities. We haven't talked about, but it's something that we're finding more and more of our clients discussing far earlier than we probably would have seen 18 months ago, but how important their exit strategy is with regard to the cloud provider that they're looking to engage with. Data doesn't move very easily. So once you've moved it, if it then becomes a period of time where actually that service that you're renting, that you're buying, is not working for you, how are you going to start to extract that data back from the platform that you've deployed it to, and how are you going to move it around? And we started to touch a little bit in terms of that mobility capability across applications. So being prepared to actually understand how you'll exit from that, as well as just building in the general kind of day-to-day mobility, is crucially important. And then finally, all of this is kind of underpinned by an attitude that's built on trying to build in the flexibility for our clients to pick the right services at the right time from the right service provider that's appropriate for you as opposed to just having to back somebody to its entirety based on a commercial value proposition. You know, choose the right thing for you at the right time with the right service provider. You can try all of this in advance before obviously pulling the trigger on purchase orders. poc.netapp.com is our online proof of concept lab, and for more local kind of highly available or high performant proof of concepts, we can work with you individually on those by the guys at Bytes to get you pulled into our POC labs. So thanks again everybody for your time. Hopefully it's been pretty informative. That's it from the guys at NetApp. So Amy and Stuart, back over to you. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks Simon, and thanks Kirk as well. So I'm just going to pop it back to my screen. So so if you do have any questions, if you could just pop those in the questions box, and I'll read them out for Kirk and Simon shortly.
So there's one question. Looks like for Kirk, if I wanted to move our file services from on-premise into Azure running Cloud ONTAP as a NAS, is this possible, and are there any limitations? So there is a written response from you, Kirk, but do you just want to reiterate that verbally, please?
Sure. So yeah, absolutely, that's possible. CIFS on Cloud ONTAP works in the exact same way as the CIFS offering or SMB3 on our on-premise ONTAP. In fact, one of the key things to bear in mind here is that the ONTAP code between our physical kit and the Cloud ONTAP is common code. The only differences are when it comes to Cloud ONTAP, how we handle virtual disks rather than physical disks. So everything further up the stack, including the SMB, NFS, and iSCSI, will work and is managed in the exact same way you would manage it today. So there's no additional prerequisites or limitations that are in that you'll have to be aware of when running in Azure. So obviously, with any file services, if you were using Active Directory in Azure for your authentication, then you need to make sure that from a networking perspective, it can connect with those Active Directory services. And it may even be worth running a virtual Active Directory node in the cloud, because it'd be a lot quicker and will have very good performance then for doing its authentication for those in those instances. But we've got some really detailed white papers that cover all the networking considerations as well.
Okay, thanks. And we have another question here. So this one's from Pete. So Pete has said, Kirk said that OnCommand Shift uses an SMB3 share. Am I right in thinking that this means it is only compatible with C. and not 7 mode?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So in 7 mode, we don't have SMB3. So for Shift, it is going to be C. But I know it's not the main topic of this call, but for anybody that does have C. systems, it is absolutely worth me calling this one out. Is that, remember the good old days where you used to be able to do a head swap between controllers? Well, now, with the latest versions of ONTAP, we're able to head swap in a clustered ONTAP system and convert all of your 7 mode systems directly into C. rather than having to provision separate kit and do a migration. So the good old days of head swap are back, and it's definitely worth calling that one out. We call it copy-free transition, CFT. So anybody that's got 7 mode and we're a bit concerned about, a large migration to cluster ONTAP, well, we've gone and solved that problem, brought back what our customers enjoyed the most about systems, which were head swapping to move between controllers, and as long as your disks are compatible with the new system, no problem at all. So exactly the same as the old world.
Okay, thanks, Kirk. So I think it looks like that's all the questions we have for today. Yeah, I think that's it for today. So if you do have any questions you wanted to submit outside the webinar, as shown on the screen, you can email the email address there. So thanks, Kirk, and thanks, Simon and Stuart as well for presenting today. And thanks, everyone, for taking the time out of your busy days to join the webinar. So as mentioned previously, there'll be a critique form at the end of the webinar. So if you would like any more information or a call back from Bytes, please do let us know in the form. Okay, thank you everyone.